Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating 8th grade history curriculum to see exactly how it tackles a literal ticking time bomb, pre-Civil War America. Just imagine a country that's growing like wildfire, right? Expanding its borders, building brand new industries. But underneath all that incredible rapid progress is a deep, fundamental division. A division driven by huge economic and social differences, particularly over the institution of slavery. So today, we are going to look at the desperate, and I mean desperate, legislative attempts by the government to defuse that bomb.
So, let's kick things off with a massive question. Can a compromise actually cause a war? We usually think of compromise as the ultimate win-win, right? You give a little, I give a little, and we both walk away happy. But what happens when the issue at hand is a profound matter of human rights? Today, we're going to explore how this curriculum completely challenges the idea that compromises always fix problems, and how trying to please everyone actually brought the United States to the brink of total collapse. All right, here's our roadmap for today. First, the quest for peace. Second, the Missouri Compromise. Third, the Compromise of 1850. Fourth, Bleeding Kansas. Fifth, why the compromises failed. And finally, morality and true education.
Let's jump right into Part 1, The Quest for Peace.
Picture the early 1800s. The United States is rapidly pushing westward. But every single time a new territory wanted to become a state, a massive, bitter argument would break out in Washington. Would it be a free state or a slave state? The leaders back then were terrified, literally terrified of a civil war, and they genuinely believed that balancing power was the only way to maintain the peace. To understand their mindset, the curriculum points us to biblical mandates, like Romans 12:18. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. The curriculum argues these leaders felt a profound moral obligation to hold the nation together and play the peacemaker in a deeply fractured society.
So how exactly did they try to keep this peace? Well, mostly by using legislation as a band-aid. We're going to track this through 3 specific, absolutely pivotal dates: 1820, 1850, and 1854. Think of these as 3 distinct, massive legislative band-aids slapped onto a wound that was just way too deep to heal on its own.
Moving on to Part 2, the Missouri Compromise.
Let's rewind to 1820. Buying the massive Louisiana territory totally scrambled the delicate balance of power. Missouri wanted to join the Union as a slave state, which would give the South more votes in the Senate. And the North? They panicked. To understand how the government tried to fix this, the curriculum highlights a really crucial analytical question. What states entered the Union under the Missouri Compromise?
They basically treated a nation like a giant seesaw. To keep it perfectly balanced, they traded one free state for one slave state. Missouri was allowed to enter the Union as a slave state, but at the exact same time, Maine was admitted as a free state. And fun fact here, they actually had to carve Maine straight out of Massachusetts just to make this political deal work. So balance was restored, for the moment. But they knew they needed a strict role for the future.
So, their big solution? They literally drew a geographic boundary line right across the map of the Louisiana Territory. Anything north of that line would forever be free, anything south would be slave. And yeah, this provided a temporary sigh of relief, but it severely limited their long-term flexibility. They drew a permanent line through a growing country, just hoping the problem would magically stay on its respective side of the fence.
Which brings us to Part 3, the Compromise of 1850.
Fast forward 30 years, by 1850, the country had grown all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and wow, the stakes were so much higher. That old line on the map, it wasn't going to cut it anymore, especially because California wanted to enter the Union as a free state. To get the South to agree to this, since it gave the North a huge advantage, the South demanded a very heavy trade-off. They got a much stricter fugitive slave law. This meant that enslaved people who escaped to the North could be hunted down, and Northern citizens were legally forced to help catch them.
This brings us to a really fascinating contradiction the curriculum asks us to consider. How did the Compromise of 1850 actually increase tension in the North? The whole point of a compromise is to lower the temperature, right? To keep the peace. But this deal, it completely backfired.
Instead of cooling things down like a fire blanket, that strict fugitive slave law acted like pure accelerant. It created deep, furious resentment in the North. You had Northerners who previously didn't pay much attention to slavery suddenly being forced, by law, to actively participate in it. So both sides felt completely dissatisfied and angry. The Band-Aid was officially beginning to peel off.
Next up, Part 4, Bleeding Kansas. By 1854, those legislative band-aids, they completely fall apart. Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act and decided to try a brand new experiment out west, based on a concept called popular sovereignty. Now, popular sovereignty just meant letting the settlers in a territory decide for themselves, by a local vote, whether to allow slavery. The government basically threw its hands up and said, look, we're not deciding this in Washington anymore. Let the people in Utah, New Mexico, Kansas, and Nebraska vote on it themselves. It sounds perfectly democratic on paper, right?
But here's the catch. If popular sovereignty is just people voting, why on earth did Kansas earn the terrifying nickname Bleeding Kansas?
Because it turned into an absolute war zone. Thousands of pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers aggressively flooded into Kansas, not just to live there, but to sway that vote by any means necessary. It led to violent, bloody clashes right in the streets. As it turns out, democracy really doesn't work well when a profound moral issue is left up to a local vote and both sides are completely willing to reject the outcome with violence. The compromise didn't bring peace, it literally brought bloodshed.
Part 5. Why the compromises failed.
Let's zoom all the way out for a second. We have to ask why all these compromises, the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, why did they all crash and burn? Well, here is the clear summary. First, they merely delayed war. They never actually resolved the disputes. Second, they completely ignored the underlying moral and economic reality of slavery. You just can't successfully compromise on basic human rights. And third, because the entire foundation was flawed, each new legislative fix led directly to new, even angrier disputes. These compromises simply dragged the nation closer and closer to a civil war.
And finally, Part 6, Morality and True Education.
Think about it. We've just spent time looking at some of the absolute smartest, most highly educated political leaders in American history trying to solve a crisis with pure political strategy and failing spectacularly. The HeroesMart Academy curriculum concludes with a really specific philosophical capstone. It argues that education without morality will hurt. The lesson posits that you can be the smartest legislator in the room, drawing these perfect lines on a map, but if your choices ignore what is morally right, they are going to cause deep pain. Attempting to be smart without a solid moral foundation ultimately caused a war.
The source material intentionally intertwines true education with biblical morality. It actually contrasts the violent failure of history's political compromises with the promise found in Romans 8:6-7, which suggests that true peace of mind comes to those who keep their mind spiritual. The curriculum's perspective here is that engaging with life from a foundation of spiritual truth brings actual, lasting peace, not just a fragile political band-aid.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought, based directly on the curriculum's framing. Look at the choices being made all around us. Are we seeking true moral peace, building on a foundation of what is right? Or are we just trying to apply temporary band-aids to really deep wounds, hoping the problems will somehow magically go away? Because if history shows us anything, it's that the band-aids always fall off. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning with purpose.